Hey guys, I'm Villain Theory. You guys wanted it. Here it is, my top 10 easiest heroes, kind of a response to my top 10 most complicated heroes video. So what do I mean by easiest heroes? Well, kind of the opposite of complicated. So I'm really going for straightforward, simple, easy to play, not easy to win with. We're not talking about power level, but easy to, understand everything that's going on and have a good time playing it. So simple cards, not too many words, not too crazy in how the interactions happen, a clear game plan so we kind of know what we're doing, things aren't too ambiguous. And the biggest and most important criteria I'm going for is new player friendly. I'm thinking if this is the person's first time ever playing Marvel Champions, how good is this character going to be? If it's their third time playing, how good is this character going to be for them? Not in terms of, winning, but understanding what's going on. Because a lot of people thought this would be actually a really helpful tool for new players to kind of, or even experienced players who want to introduce new players, what kind of characters should they be playing? Up first is Spider-Man Peter Parker. He had to make the list, but 10th, this is kind of the worst position, although it's, out of 52 heroes currently, he is in the top 10 still, I've said, so, it is a good placement for him, but I think this will surprise people as he's kind of the tutorial character from the core box that the game recommends you play first, but Spider-Man has a few complicated things going for him, and everyone will maybe forget to draw the card when they're attacked, but the thing is, you're not drawing a card when attacked specifically, it's when the villain initiates an attack, so if you defend for someone else, that doesn't happen. I think that's kind of confusing. And he also has Backflip. Backflip is an amazing card, but the game has massively changed in terms of the defender rules. If you read the original rules kind of guide and then read the 1.5 rules reference that we're currently on, how to defend has like 2 pages almost. It has a lot of entries basically, a lot of bullet points and things you need to understand for every different situation. So compared to before, you do not need to exhaust to defend to then play backflip. You can just play backflip when you're attacked. So I think the rules around defending are a little bit complicated. So any character with a defense card is inherently just slightly harder than they would have been otherwise to understand without that. So that's one part of it. But a lot of his stuff is reactive. So he has his enhanced spider senses, which can cancel treacheries, but you need to understand what treachery is, how the timing works, can they work for other players or not. Spider tracer goes on a minion, which isn't too hard, but who triggers it? Can anyone trigger? There are a lot of timing questions and things that just kind of surround his kit, and his resource generators, the web shooters, they have charges on them. I've seen this confuse a couple of players, in person, introducing them with Spider-Man. I think just playing something on the board and exhausting it is maybe enough of a first step in your first game or two of Marvel Champions. And then having to deal with counters and things as well, and different resource types and wild resources. I don't know. I think it's just a tiny bit much. And with that said, I may sound like I'm arguing for him to be complicated. I'm more just trying to put it out there of why I put him at 10th instead of, closer to 1, despite him being the official kind of tutorial character. But otherwise, I think he's a very, very good character for new players. Swinging web kick, super simple, super good, very fun. He's got great defense, great survivability. So newer players, players maybe, less optimizing things as well, aren't going to have to worry about survivability so much. He has a lot going for him. He's still a good character, and he's a really good character to teach you the timing and interaction with those things, like treacheries and defense. But definitely more complicated than some heroes, in my opinion. So this might be a bit of a hot take. I'm curious what you guys think. Have I convinced you that Spider-Man Peter Parker is closer to around the 10 mark than, the 1, the easiest mark? But yeah, let me know in the comments. The last thing I'm going to do for each character as we go through is, since I'm trying to help out newer players a bit more in this video, is recommend aspects to play them in, both for solo and multiplayer. And this is not necessarily what I think is strongest, but what I think is going to give the smoothest, easiest play experience, least likely to go wrong, least necessary to have, a big card collection and, know what specific cards to use for that hero. So for Spider-Man, I'm going to say if you're starting off playing him in Justice, which is recommended in the core set. It is his official pre-con. I think that's really good for him. He has that low forwarding, so Justice really rounds him out really nicely. Next, we have Hawkeye, everyone's favorite archer hero, and also the only archer hero. Don't forget to find your bow at the start of the game. Everything relies around this bow. If you want to play an arrow of his, you have to exhaust it. And I think that's easy to forget, but not really a big factor in his difficulty. He is a pretty simple character. He's kind of point and shoot, use an arrow every turn, and you're doing really good. But I think there's a trap with Hawkeye. I think his hero card, it says action, exhaust Hawkeye to ready his bow. 9 times out of 10, if not more, but that's debatable. I think it is the wrong move to exhaust his bow. Yes, that will let you play another arrow, but, and here's the big downside, you lose out on being able to use your basic attack. Now he's an attack stat of 2 with his bow out, which he always has his bow out. He will have an attack stat of 3. So to ready up your bow, you're losing out on using free attack, which basically means your arrows, if they're dealing damage, you have to subtract 3 damage from their damage to counteract what you've lost, so on and so forth. So it's a little bit of a hidden inefficiency, a bit of a trap. The other thing which I think can make him difficult, especially in solo play, is he has very low forwarding and very low defense. So I'm recommending to play him in leadership in solo play, because leadership is kind of the all-rounder aspect, but allies can block for you and they can fort. It just smooths things out immeasurably, and I think if you play him in leadership, he's actually really, really solid. Next up, we had Quicksilver, and I had some mixed feelings about this because he's going to ready up at different times in different phases, which I think is a little bit confusing, and his stats can change with maximum velocity, which is the, +2 to all your stats for the round. So, you have to keep track of that, so maybe that's a little bit more complicated than some things Hawkeye does, but at the same time, he just readies up and he uses basic attack, or his basic fort, or his basic defense, and it's basically the whole character. It doesn't really get any more complicated than that, whereas with Hawkeye, you might have too many arrows to play, you might not be sure which one to prioritize, you have these resource generators that only work toward his arrows and things, whereas Quicksilver's resource generator, friction resistance, okay, a little bit more going on with that, but you can just spend it on whatever you want to, and because Quicksilver can boost all his different stats in different ways, he's kind of more self-sufficient, a little bit slower to build, but I don't think that's too much of a factor, especially for new players starting off. I don't think that's going to matter, especially against standard Rhino. Let's give an example there. So I think overall Quicksilver, just ready up, use your stats, increase your stats. That's a very simple, clear game plan that I think is very easy and obvious to understand with him, which makes him on the top 10 list for me, makes him number 8 for me. So yeah, Quicksilver is a really good character for new players to try, I would say. Maybe not the best, but maybe after 2 or 3 games, this is when the characters that I'm putting at this end of the list I think are going to be good to introduce. So beginner solo aspect, I would recommend leadership. He has these different upgrades which boost his different stats. So there's one that boosts his forwarding, one that boosts his attack, one that boosts his defense. Well, what if you really need to remove some threat, but you find the attack sort of upgrade first, and you don't see your forwarding one until near the end of your deck? Well, you're going to struggle to remove threat. Leadership being the all-rounder aspect, you can get some good threat removal from it. Flip side, what if you find, the opposite upgrade, but you have the opposite problem on the board? Leadership can kind of fill in for whatever Quicksilver cannot provide himself at the moment until he has the correct upgrade and so on. So leadership just rounds out the unpredictability of finding the right upgrade at the right time, and he's already got a blue card backing. Leadership is blue. I think it's kind of nice. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you Into the AM, and I'd love if you guys just heard me out for 15 seconds. Into the AM are supporting the channel, so this is, it's not sponsored, but they are kind of partnered with me. They are helping out. They are a really good clothing brand. So if you want to head to intotheam.com/vtheory, there's a discount code vtheory as well. You can get 10% off your purchase, and I really like this stuff. I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but I'm actually wearing this t-shirt right now. I really like it. I really like a bunch of the stuff I have from them. I think it's really good. Oh god, I messed up my camera out now. What a nightmare. The things I do for Into the AM. I think we're all good now. Yeah, I really like their stuff. Check it out. There's an upcoming sale, I think, on the 4th of July on some stuff as well. So check that out. I think it's going to be really good. I think the quality is nice. I think they look good. They have graphic tees, shirts, everything you could like. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Links in the description as well. And let's get on with the video. Now we have to talk about Thor, Asgard's mightiest Avenger. And Thor is really, really fun. He has a hammer. He wants to hit minions with it. He'll sometimes bring minions in just to hit them, which is kind of fun. And I think that's a pretty straightforward game plan. He has a hammer, hit things. He benefits from engaging minions. So things that help him engage minions are really beneficial. And his precon comes with Get Over Here, which means you can engage a minion that was engaged with someone else. That will draw you 2 cards. As long as you can understand that, about how engaging minions works, you basically understand Thor and what he wants to do. Is he the most powerful hero, specifically for solo play? I would say, he obviously isn't, so you might not find you're winning a ton with him, but take him to multiplayer, or if you really, learn and build into him, he can do really well, especially against minion-heavy scenarios. He's a minion slayer, and there's not too much too complicated going on. You do need to understand about resource types, lightning storm, I think it's called. You do need to understand to, play your hammer again, Mjolnir. Hopefully I'm saying that right, Mjolnir. Once, you hammer throw it back to you. There are a couple of things there, but overall I think he's pretty straightforward. So I think he's a great character for new players. Everyone thinks of Thor as the aggression hero. I think in solo play, he really lacks threat removal, so I think justice or leadership can be more consistent and maybe a smoother introduction as you learn the character. But as soon as you hit multiplayer, I don't care if it's 2 or 4 player, throw him an aggression, give him that get over here card we just talked about from his precon, so if you own Thor, you'll have this card to use. At number 6, we have Hulk, and with a caveat that this is mainly in multiplayer because his, boarding isn't quite all there. In solo, he's going to have a harder time, definitely. But you can play him solo. But let's talk about multiplayer. What does Hulk want to do? Hulk wants to smash. That is all he wants to do. He wants to hit enemies. He just wants to do damage. Now, his cards are better if you pay for them with physical resources, so you do have to understand how physical resources work. I don't think that's too difficult, though. The difficult thing, I think, about Hulk is that he can have some very awkward hands. He's a little bit limited. He's a little bit strange. Hulk is unfortunately got a bit of a reputation for not being the strongest character in the game, whereas, maybe in the comic book lore, maybe in the movies, he would be, way, way up there. So, slightly unfortunate in that regard. That is why he is not even lower, but he does have a very simple, clear game plan, very simple, clear cards, and you know what you want to do with Hulk. And Hulk, he knows what he's about. So, Hulk comes in at number 6. I recommend Justice or Leadership. Again, you'll see this for quite a few characters for solo that I'm recommending it, but I do think it will give a smoother experience, and it will just round him out. In multiplayer, though, and you'll see this as well with a lot of the high damage characters, going to recommend Aggression. He wants to hit things. This is the most clear, straightforward way to hit things. Then make sure you have a Justice player, perhaps, to round out that. That 0 forwarding he has. That will help out a lot. Number 5, we have Wolverine, and we are into the top 5, which is pretty exciting. Although I do want to clarify, maybe I should have done this early on, that just because I'm saying a character is, easy to get started with, does not mean it is, easy to master. You can have a character that's easy to learn and hard to master. I think some of these characters come under that category. Does Wolverine? Maybe not, too hard to master, but definitely he's got some interesting things going for him. The most important thing to know with Wolverine is please claw responsibly. He starts with this weapon upgrade in play called Wolverine's Claws, which might seem kind of obvious, when you think about it. That can deal damage to you in order to play attacks. So it's really good, and it's pretty straightforward and simple, but you do need to watch your health. Now, yes, maybe a newer player might take too much damage and lose the game, so that is a danger and something that keeps him from being any, further up this list of easiness, so to speak, of, simplicity, straightforwardness. But here's the thing. I think if a player is taking too much damage and, kind of losing because they use their claws, they probably would have lost, in a very similar sense if they didn't have his healing and stuff, if they weren't managing damage coming toward them in the first place. If you understand what health is and how to not lose to, damage, you're probably going to know that you don't want to use your claws if it's going to put you in danger of being defeated. So I don't think that is too big of a kind of difficulty thing. And other than that, he really just plays lots and lots of attacks. His cards aren't that complicated to read. Maybe his signature ally a little bit, but overall, I think he's a really clear, straightforward game plan. His cards are pretty nice. You do need to kind of know what piercing does, but it is pretty straightforward. It pierces tough. So I think Wolverine is a really great and fun, exciting character for new players. The recommended aspects here get a little bit more crazy because I think outside of protection, I think anything is basically good for people to start with. Yes, he's a high damage character, but he's not a low forwarding character, which is different to some of the ones we've just looked at. So really anything works well. The reason I left out protection, because protection is really good for Wolverine, is because you need specific kind of protection attacks because he wants to play attacks to really get the best out of that, in my opinion. And I don't know if a new player is going to have those or know to add those. Coming in hot at number 4, it's Captain America. I think for a lot of people, this might be closer to number 1, but there's a couple of things at play here for me that kind of just put him lower down. But I would say the top 4 for me were in such close contention. And at some point while I was making the preparation for this video, I had all of them at 1 at some point, and I just kind of had to decide what kind of order to put that top 4 in. So here's Captain America. He's got a shield. He's got really balanced stats. He can ready up with his I can do this all day ability, which is very forgiving. It lets you kind of do whatever you need whenever you need to. You can defend and still fort, or you can fort twice, attack and fort. It gives you so many possibilities, but it's not complicated to understand. So I think that is a huge, huge thing in sort of his benefit for being an easy character to play. His deck building is also extremely forgiving. He is maybe the ultimate jack of all trades in some respect. You can basically build whatever deck you like for Captain America, and it will kind of work. So why isn't he number 1? Well, a couple of things. He's got that defense card, a bit like I talked about with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and the defense rules I think are just something a little bit complicated, more than other rules if you have to interact with them a lot. I think also even some more experienced players will sometimes get his alter ego ability wrong in multiplayer because the kind of, turn order, who plays what in which, it's a little bit weird. He also has shield toss, which I think is a very kind of odd card. It's a zero cost card, but then you have to discard cards to start getting actual value out of it, and then it returns something you had on the board to your hand, and you might need to then replay it afterwards, which is just a little bit weird overall, which just held him back ever so slightly. But really, really solid character. If you're looking for a great character to introduce someone to Marvel Champions with, or you've just been playing recently, maybe you just got the core set a week or two ago, get Captain America. He's going to be a really, really smooth character to play, really fun and really thematic as well. I think with, all the shield interaction and things, I quite like him. So yeah, Captain America, great choice for new players. You can play him in basically anything because he's that jack of all trades. It doesn't matter if you're solo or multiplayer, he does really well in every aspect, which is also kind of another point in his favor of being easier. Next up, we have Captain Marvel at number 3, and again, another strong contender for the number 1 spot here. I think she's a great character to introduce new players with. Now, I think the hardest part about her, or the two hardest parts about her, are that one, you need to understand the resource types because she's all about these energy resources on a lot of her cards, and she also has something going on with the aerial trait. So what is the aerial trait? How do you know she's got aerial? You have to play a certain upgrade to be able to become aerial, and that will interact with her helmet and her forwarding card, but you can remove that upgrade. So you're kind of keeping track of both your aerial and how it's interacting with multiple cards. That just held her back very slightly for me, but she's such a good character for new players. Plenty of card draw, plenty of money to play things, pretty forgiving in how you do things, pretty good at surviving, and it's not a power kind of consideration in this regard, but kind of how forgiving it can be in the different styles you might play her. So I think she is a very strong contender as well. And I think a lot of people might put her at number 1, but only one person could be there. So, this was tough. For solo play, I would say Justice or Leadership for her. I just think her forwarding card isn't super good, but she also has super high damage, and she's pretty good at surviving. You want to try and use her rechannel ability basically every turn you can to heal, so she doesn't really need protection or aggression so much. In multiplayer, do whatever you like with her. I do think protection is maybe slightly worse, but you can still do a lot of good things with it. I think it's pretty interesting to try. Now I have 8 honorary mentions. I'll try and speak a little bit on each of them without going too long into detail. We also have Iron Man and She-Hulk from the core set, who are really strong contenders for this list as well. But Iron Man's kind of weird with how he sets up his hand size in hero form. You kind of have to stay alter ego for a turn or 2, or 3, or 4 if you're unlucky. With the core set, you won't have enough tech cards to add to his deck to make him more consistent, which kind of just rules him out. And he's got a few other things going on. She-Hulk, I think, is in some ways straightforward. She just wants to hit things, but she wants to change form a lot. She has some things like the alter ego. She has some things that one has, have taken damage and, deal damage to her, which is a little bit of something to manage. Not too bad as we see with Wolverine, but it's definitely a slight factor there. But the most difficult thing is in the rules reference 1.5, the way she now interacts with stun cards, with her superhuman strength card. It's a whole topic. It's too complicated for this video, but for that reason alone, she did not make the list. I actually originally had her in here around, between number 10 and 8. I wasn't sure, but had to cut her. Ant-Man and Wasp were very similarly kind of ranked in my head. They are maybe numbers 11 and 12 if I, went further with this list. They are really good characters for new players to play. Pretty straightforward, no big deal. But they do have this form-changing thing going on, and different cards will work or not work in one form, or work differently in one form, and that, to me, just slightly nudged them out of this list. But it was very close. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Maybe they should have been on here, but yeah, definitely great characters for new players here as well. Then, on the other side of the coin, what I hear a lot of people say is that if you're introducing new players to the game, give them a very powerful character, because even if they're not doing things, super well, super efficiently, knowing exactly what's going on, just because they're doing a lot of stuff, a lot of, powerful stuff, they will do well, and that will be good for the team. But the thing is, if I was a new player at least, I would rather do kind of, less well overall in terms of, winning the game, but understand what I am doing and why I am doing it. And I think some of the stronger characters don't necessarily convey that. So I'm talking about Venom, Spider-Ham, and Doctor Strange. With Spider-Ham, you've got to manage these toon counters, which is a whole separate resource type that works with this weird, interaction. You take damage to get resources. I think that's a little bit much to manage, even if he's really strong. Doctor Strange, yeah, very, very powerful. And it's not, exactly complicated to play lots of cards from the invocation deck, which is generally his strongest thing. But I don't think that's particularly, engaging. If it's your first time playing, you might not even know how to, prioritize that or what to do. It's kind of a separate thing to manage. And I don't think when you look at his hero cards, they are that straightforward. So if you're playing him in a more traditional style, which I think newer players are more likely to do, I don't think he, makes it onto this top 10 list personally. But let me know what you guys think. Venom, I think, is a bit closer to making it on here, but he does play around a lot of different types of resources and generating, wilds. I think wilds are inherently more complicated to understand. His cards want two of the same resource type, basically, to play a lot of the time. He has Spider Sense, which draws from a card when an enemy initiates an attack, but his Grasping Tendril stops attacks, and I think the interactions are kind of a little bit weird. Spider-Man Miles Morales is definitely the closest contender. He was also a contender for the top 10. I maybe put him around 13, 14. I wasn't quite sure. Let me know what you guys think. He has some interesting things going on. On the one hand, I think it's pretty simple to understand how to use his events and things, but they do want a specific resource type. But he also has these upgrades which can trigger when he, uses basic abilities, and I think that kind of thing, mimicking his events but not being his events, is a little bit strange. I think, he wants to go Alter Ego to use some of his things. You need to know what to shuffle back into his deck with his Alter Ego ability. Things like that, I just think, raise a couple of questions. Also, the Peter Parker thing as well, in terms of the web shooters with counters on that I mentioned earlier. So you've got a couple of things going on. But overall, I actually think of all these characters, of all this kind of thing, I do think Spider-Man Miles Morales is a great choice for new players. And if you played 3 or 4 games, he's probably going to be great to jump into then. Really, really solid. At number 2, we have Gamora, which I wonder if it will surprise people. I don't think she's often thought of, but I'm always recommending her to new players. I think she is really, really straightforward. Her game plan is very, very clear. She wants to play events. She wants to play an attack event and a thought event. This is because her identity card, has these 2 abilities on there, which reward you for each one. So a really, really clear game plan. But then we look at her cards. Most of them just say, deal, this damage or remove this threat. Some of them do say, you have to play a thought card first before you play this attack card to deal more damage, but thought is written in the trait, it's written in brackets near the thing. I think it's pretty easy to understand if you've played a thwarting event or not. I don't think that's complicated at all, and the most complicated thing is to remember to use these responses she has when you play these attack and thwarting event cards. I also think events are the easiest card type to understand and play in Marvel Champions. I heard this from Nelson, who heard this from Brant from Step Into the Portal, but he always recommends giving new players decks that are very event heavy, because they're just kind of, one and done effects. They are not, something you're going to have to manage on the board or add any complexity. They don't interact with too many other things. You just play it, get the effect. That is basically Gamora. That is everything Gamora is. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Nothing super, super complicated is going on with her. Now, I will say in solo play, you might have too much thwarting that you don't need to, play a thwarting event every turn. But in multiplayer, I think it's a pretty solid strategy and pretty simple to understand. I think you can understand most of her game plan in a pretty easy manner. Something a little bit harder for her maybe is her deck building. She can take cards from other aspects. Something that I think is more difficult with her is that she has 2 defense cards, and we talked about that with Captain America and Spider-Man Peter Parker. The defense timing is a little bit weird, and it gets weirder for her because her abilities on her signature card are once per phase. There are 2 phases, the hero phase and villain phase. So if you play her defense card, which is also an attack and thwarting card at the same time, a little bit complicated, you can trigger all her responses in the villain phase, then still be ready to do that in the hero phase. But for my money, Gamora, give her to a player, and they will just, play pretty well. Honestly, it's hard to go wrong with Gamora. So in terms of aspects, I'm saying aggression for solo play. So when you play an attack event, you can trigger the finesse ability she has to remove 1 threat from a scheme. This means in solo play, you might not have any threat left, so you don't want to build into Justice, for example, which is the other aspect I really like for her. It just might not be enough threat. In multiplayer, however, plenty of threat, plenty of damage to deal as well, aggression or Justice, plenty of good events there. Even with the core set and just, Gamora, you're going to have plenty of ammunition. I think that's really, really good. The number 1 spot I've actually given to Black Panther, which, again, maybe that will surprise some people, but I think he has really, really simple cards with a really straightforward game plan. He wants to play his Black Panther upgrades, then he wants to play Wakanda Forever to trigger them. Well, that's the character. He has 5 copies of Wakanda Forever, which is the most, copies of a card that any character in the game has, so you don't have to learn all these different cards. You know what it does. His upgrades aren't things you need to trigger every turn and exhaust and so on, which I think actually in some ways makes them easier as well. You just need to learn that to use them, to use their effects, you need to play Wakanda Forever. That's the character. That is basically the whole character. His alter ego support just draws you cards. His ability, it's just retaliate. It's pretty simple, and they explain what this keyword does on the character himself. I don't think it's complicated at all. The hardest part is that if you have multiple of the Black Panther upgrades out, you have to choose which order to use them. That's all. That is the only complicated thing about him, in my opinion. So I'm curious what you guys think in the comments, but I almost don't have much more to talk about for Black Panther. I don't think there's anything too unusual. Play a couple upgrades, use your events to trigger them. That's it. In terms of aspects, I would say play him in Justice or Leadership, just because his footing is kind of his weakest point, but it's not too bad. I do think being able to go Alter Ego more safely because you've got the threat lower as well is good, because Golden City is such a powerful Alter Ego support. You want to be safe to go and use it sometimes. But yeah, you can kind of do whatever you need with him. He is very, very good. Multiplayer, you can kind of do anything. Again, just because I don't think his footing is super good, I would maybe pair him with Justice or Leadership. Make sure someone in multiplayer is playing one of those, even if it's Black Panther. But otherwise, you are good to go. And that concludes my list. I put Black Panther at number 1, but Gamora, Captain Marvel, Captain America, I also think have a very, very strong claim to being number 1 as well. What do you guys think of those? Were any of those maybe, should not be on here? Do you agree with them? Who do you think should have been on here? I'd love to hear any of this. Like, comment, subscribe. Really helps the channel. YouTube loves that stuff, so, I'm really appreciative. But if you've just watched the video, or, maybe shared it to a friend or something, that is huge, huge as well. So thank you so much. And yeah, links down below if you're interested. We've got, Discord if you want to join in the conversation, whatever's good for you. But hopefully this has helped you guys. If you want more top 10 videos, let me know. I do think I'm in danger of becoming a bit like Watch Mojo if I do too many of them, but they're pretty fun to do and easy, to talk about different aspects of the game. And on that note, finally, I'll see you guys in the next video.